Today's topic are warning signs that someone may be in your life who is trying to take advantage in some way and is in it for the long game. The idea for this segment, I'm going to put a link to the clip. I had seen a video on Orion Kelly's channel not that long ago in which he was talking about being scammed. Unfortunately, I have known a lot of people, and I am one of them. I am in this bucket. I am definitely in this bucket of people who have been the victim of people trying to take advantage, and we're in it for the long game. Okay? So where I'm coming from with this video and with this topic is that I'm a smart person. Look, I am a smart person. My husband is a smart person too, by the way. And I know the warning signs of people who are trying to scam or take advantage and are in it not for the long haul, but for a short, big scam, but it's like all at once. Okay. That's not what I'm talking about. I myself personally have been the victim of 3 very life-altering things. Situations, events, relationships, however you want to phrase this. Someone entering my life who, in my opinion, could understand fairly quickly that I was vulnerable. They might not have been able to put their finger on it and say it was because of autism, but there was something in me that they knew they had their mark. And one of these situations ended up in a sexual assault. And 2 of the other situations ended up in rather significant financial, I'm just going to call it theft. And I want to talk about this because I think that most of us who are autistic, even if we don't want to admit it, know on some level we may be more vulnerable to this type of thing than a neurotypical person or even an allistic person. And I think most of us try really hard to be both in a life of having human connection and trying to understand how to live the line between I'm going to trust everybody and I'm going to trust no one. And when these 3 separate events happened to me, and they were life-altering events. I'm not talking about little things. Some of these things, people were in this for years to try to con me out of money. And like I said, one of them was a sexual assault. And after they happened, I wanted to be like a pendulum and swing way to the side and say, I'm going to trust no one. The problem with that approach is that human beings are social creatures. Even if we socialize differently than allistic people, we are social creatures. And so for me personally, I couldn't stay in that place. And my aim here is to ask some questions or to bring up some questions of things that I wish I had asked earlier in the process. And all three of these situations involved someone entering into my life suddenly that I did not previously know, who played the friend card of all of a sudden they were my best friend and they wanted to be around me all the time and they were around me all the time. And they just basically dropped into my life. And because it was such a long game, I'm going to call it a long game, I missed a lot of warning signs that had I seen a video like this earlier, I may have looked at it a different way. And all three of these situations were not a simple, hey, I need money, and you give somebody money. The third situation that I'll probably talk about a little bit more because it'll make more sense involves some construction. And so large sums of money were being passed anyway because of the construction. And unfortunately, we chose to go with a contractor that also tried to be our friend rather than going with like a construction company. And so my first thing to look for is don't mix relationships with business. Keep business business. Find a reputable company that other people can vouch for, that you initiate the contact and they only are a part of your life in that capacity. Had we done that, I would be in a very different life situation today than I am. But because we were mixing friendship, I'll call it friendship, it's not really friendship, with what should have been a business relationship, we entered into a situation in which we got in so deep that once we kind of realized what was going on, we didn't know how to get out of it. And the person that did this, in my opinion, is a con artist and has done it to other people. I am not talking about people that in good faith enter in some sort of relationship and they happen to maybe be a narcissist or something, right? I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about people that enter into a relationship because they want something specific from that relationship that is not the fruit of human connection. And so the first thing I'll say that is a really good question to ask is, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, the question is, does this person have things in common with me? Or do they seem interested in me for no reason? This was complicated in my situation because it involved both my husband and myself, and the individual had a lot in common with my husband. They genuinely had things in common. But I had nothing in common with this person at all. But this individual was so savvy to how to manipulate someone that maybe has some social deficits, that I looked past that. I willingly looked past that because I thought, well, my husband has some things in common with this person. And even if he didn't, until it was very obvious that this was going bad, I thought that there was mutual benefit to the relationship with this individual. And there really wasn't, because they were so good at spinning it. And the second piece of advice I would give is do a background check on people. I know it might feel like a little bit of a slimy thing to do, but had I done so, I would have known that this person, for example, had mugshots on the internet, for example, among other things. And if they make any claims that seem a little bit too good to be true, verify these things early, outside of what this person tells you. And the question of what they're getting out of the relationship, I would ask that question both, what are they getting out of it in the short term, and what are they getting out of it in the long term? Because people that are truly friends and truly want to spend time with us as humans and have a connection with us as humans, even if that connection is born from a place of even loneliness, there is mutual benefit to that relationship, right? Because that human connection is a reward in and of itself. But when other things start getting mixed in beyond that human connection and beyond the scope of what I think is reasonable. So, if your friend is moving and they want help moving and they do kind of the normal thing of, hey, I'll give you some pizza. And in my younger years, would have said, here's some beer or whatever. Wouldn't do that now because I'm sober. But that's something that would be normal, right? But if they're asking for things that are abnormal, in my situation, my spidey senses were going off and I ignored them because the social advantage I thought I was getting made up for it. And in the beginning it did. And then all of a sudden it snowballed and it didn't. I would also ask, let me put my questions on this monitor so I can see them. I would also ask if they do start bringing things into the relationship that may be questionable about whether or not they're reasonable. Because, the longer we know people, right, the more they can lean on us in difficult times and have it be a legitimate thing. One question I would ask is what this person is asking of me, is it reasonable for how long they've known me? So if you don't know the answer to that question, some of us are socially inexperienced enough that we honestly wouldn't know. Ask people who you do trust, family members, other friends and acquaintances, other people in the autistic community, because that sort of social naivete, people who are really in the long game of a con can smell that naivete from a very long distance away, in my opinion. And if you have had some decent social relationships in your adult life, because look, I've lived a lot of life at this point, right? I've had social relationships with people. I'm not somebody who has never done that. And I know that there are different levels of social impairment with every single person who's autistic because we're all individuals, right? But made the assumption very early on that with this person, because they were allowing me to be around their child, alone with their child, like I offered to babysit and things like that, and that was not part of the con, that surely they couldn't be a dangerous person, because if they were dangerous, they wouldn't involve their kid. And that was a really big mistake on my part. It was a very big mistake on my part. Another question I would ask is, if this person just suddenly showed up in your life, why did they show up? Who initiated the outreach? And if they are leveraging a social relationship and they tend to reach out to you way more than you reach out to them, and that's not normal for you with other people, that's also a red flag. The person in this situation that happened to me would show up out of the blue, or would call me and say, hey, I'm 10 minutes away. I want to come see you. It was a very common thing. And I, at first, was excited and like, hey, this person wants to hang out or whatever. And if I tried to do the same thing, or even, like, hey, gave him a day's notice, but it was on my schedule and wanted to say, hey, I want to come to your house, and it wasn't something they initiated, they always bounced it back that it wouldn't work for them, because they only wanted me in their life in a very controlled manner. So for example, like when I was around their child, they only wanted me around their child when they knew they could use the child to help exploit me. Not if the child wasn't feeling all that great, or the child had a friend over, or, any number of things that are normal when you have children. And another thing that happened that was very confusing to me at the time is they seemed overly generous with things that other friends, like real friends, had not, and would just randomly give us things that they would make these excuses, and they would say things like, oh, hey, I have this, and then, insert very expensive piece of equipment, like electronic equipment type of thing. I'm getting a new one. I want to give you the old one because I don't want to go through the hassle of selling it. And the equipment that they were giving us was expensive. And I thought, well, we're getting this object. So when the balance, the financial balance started to go wacky, I was like, well, but we have this thing that they gave us, right? Well, we ended up losing a lot more money than that thing was worth. But it was used as a tool by this person to not only help us trust them, but to distract from the actual con. And the last thing I'll mention that is a question I would ask is, do they I'm trying to think of a way to put this. The situation then ended up in a sexual assault with me. Do they ever act too friendly? And that at the time, I was much younger when this happened, the sexual assault, and I didn't have a good gauge of what too friendly meant for the length of time I had known this person, because I was very socially inexperienced. And even though I was an adult, I'm a few decades past this. But they were trying to get too close too fast. And the speed at which they were trying to get really close didn't bother me at the time, but it was abnormal. And I didn't know that. And they were going for that so that they could then do what they did to me. And it completely blindsided me. So I made a short not too long ago that was about sexual assault and alcohol and being drunk. And it was really interesting because I received a lot of dislikes on it, and that's fine. I don't, people are allowed to have their own opinions, right? That doesn't bother me. But what I hope the reason for the down votes or the dislikes or whatever you call them in YouTube, I'm hoping it's not that we don't think that we are immune from having this happen, because there are some very sophisticated cons out there. Very sophisticated cons. And in the case of this particular individual that did the financial thing, there was an element at the very end of it of fear. They were armed, and when we didn't quite know how to get out of it, there was the added complication of them being armed every time they were in our house. And so there was an intimidation factor that happened there as well that I was not ready for. That just wasn't something that I was prepared for. And I looked past it for a long time because I wanted the situation to work out well. And I don't think anybody in the entire population, not just the autistic population, but I think anybody can be scammed if somebody is in it for the long game and they're trying to con people. I don't think anybody's immune from it. I think everybody has vulnerable things about themselves that a con artist can weasel in and try to take advantage of somebody. But I do hope that the downvotes were not from autistic people who think that I was trying to be condescending or something, because I made the short and I'm making this video as well because there was a large amount of harm done to me in these three situations that if I had to live my life over again, they are three of my largest regrets. And I'm really glad that Orion Kelly made the video that he made. He was very raw in it. And like I said, I'll put the link in the description. But it really got me thinking about how this is the type of thing that people need to talk about more. There is a tendency in myself to want to carry shame with it and not talk about it. But I think that the only way that we wisen up to it is to hear other people candidly share their experiences so that other people can learn from it. And now, because I'm autistic and because I tend to think the way that I do, I almost go through a flowchart type of thing in my head when I meet new people. And most of the time, the first question I ask in that flowchart is, who initiated the relationship? If I initiated the relationship, it's typically safer. And that's not to say that other people can't initiate relationships, friendships and all kinds of different relationships. Somebody has to initiate it, right? But if somebody is initiating or trying to initiate a relationship with me, I immediately stop and think through to myself, okay, where'd this person come from? Did they come from a situation that I was a part of and it seemed like coincidence and we just sort of met and it worked out? There can be people who are in cons there are con artists who do that, but there are a lot of genuine people who, you share an interest or you share some sort of a faith community or you share some sort of, larger community tie and things organically happen and it's just a normal relationship. But I myself am guarded in a way that I would not have been had these three situations not happened to me. And the other point that I'll make about alcohol, because as I've said in other videos, and I have a playlist about this, I am a sober alcoholic of a little over 3 years. I cannot say that I've experienced this personally, but I have known people that it has happened to. So I want to put this out here as a warning as well. Just because someone is in recovery, whether we're talking about a rehab situation or a 12-step program or any other type of program or, anything that's got a social element to it, that doesn't mean that everybody there is a safe person. I have known people that have gotten into relationships with people that they met as part of a recovery situation that they ended up in very bad situations. And so if you do have an addiction and you do find that you're in recovery and you are staying clean or staying sober or making a really honest effort to do so, and you are hanging around with other people in the recovery community, fantastic. But no, and I hate to say this because I'm not one of them, right? Like there was no crime element of my particular addiction. But a lot of people that suffer addictions eventually do end up with some sort of a criminal element in their past, because it takes a lot of money to feed a habit. Even an alcoholic habit, it takes a lot of money. And so there are people from all walks of life who enter into rehab and IOPs and PHPs and 12-step programs and all of these different things that are available as part of, the established recovery community. And it's not unheard of that things just go really bad, because things go well as long as both people are clean and sober. But when one person goes off the rails, all of a sudden the other person's missing money. I have known several people who have gotten into roommate type situations where, it seemed up front like it was going to be a great thing because, hey, I'm sober, this other person's trying to be sober too. We've got a bond because we came out of, rehab together or whatever. And within a period of months, one person in that relationship, whether it's a friend, a partner, whatever, and then all of a sudden people get screwed over because maybe both names weren't on the lease and one person can't hold down a job because they've reverted back into their addiction, active addiction, or, theft, or, whatever. It can go wrong in any number of ways. And I hate to say that you have to be cautious in the recovery community, but you really do. You really, really do. In fact, when I went for my autism assessment, I was talking to the psychologist about my history, with substance use disorder, and how I'm not a big AA and 12-step person. And that's not to say I don't think other people can get advantage out of it. And that's not to say I never go to a meeting, because sometimes I do, but that's not my jam. And I was telling her this, and she made a point of saying that in the local community where I live, people have to be really careful going to these meetings, because a lot of folks that show up are mandated by courts that they have to go. And so then it doesn't become anonymous, because a lot of the people that are there already have a nefarious past and they don't want to be there. And so they're already sort of planning their next thing, and they're looking for vulnerable people. And there are very vulnerable things that are shared in the rooms. I mean, people get really raw with their lives in 12-step programs. And it's one of the reasons why they work for a lot of people, is that a lot of folks that have addiction problems have never been able to be that raw about things. They've just numbed the difficult things out with the substance. So I want to throw that out there as well, that when you add an element of addiction with autism, we're at an even easier mark. And I think that it is more important to talk about it and be upfront about it and let other people learn from the journey we've had than to keep it a conversation behind closed doors. And I'm far enough from this situation that I've had a lot of time to process what's going on, and I've had a lot of therapy, because these were life-altering events in my case. So share in the comments if there are other questions that you would add to mine through your own life experience, because there's any number of ways that somebody can go into a long con against an autistic person, or against a person who is in recovery who's autistic. And so you may have different lessons than I have learned, and different questions that other people can get some wisdom out of in the comments. If you are finding this type of content helpful, do let me know that in the comments. Like and subscribe. I want to produce content that's going to help other people. And sometimes I come up with ideas and it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what'll stick, just out of my own life experiences. And so that feedback is really important to me. And if it's not helpful, let me know that too. Feedback is good, even if it is negative feedback. So I'm all for that. I don't feel like if there's something that I'm making videos about that you're like, whoa, this lady's like way off in left field. If you feel that way, obviously I may not be the right channel for you, but if there are things that just don't resonate, leave me feedback. And if there are things that do resonate, leave me feedback too. So thanks for watching. Take care.